They say men want love, but what they really crave is control, and nothing threatens that more than a woman who sees through them. Freud once said that we are not masters in our own houses. So what happens when a woman quietly dismantles a man's illusion of dominance? Today you'll discover how to trigger obsession, not through beauty or submission, but by shaking the very core of his ego. Stay with me, because once you learn to touch the unconscious, he'll never stop thinking about you. Freud believed the ego is not a fixed entity, but a structure constantly shaped by internal conflicts and social pressures. In men especially, this ego is often built around achievements, control, and the perception of being desired. What seems like confidence is frequently just a carefully guarded defense against deep insecurities. When a woman understands this, she no longer sees arrogance as strength, but as a sign of emotional vulnerability. Hurting a man's ego does not mean humiliating him. It means subtly revealing that he is not the center of your world. The moment you break his illusion of superiority, even slightly, you shake the foundation of how he sees himself. This disturbance activates something primal, a desire to restore, control, to win back the admiration he unconsciously needs to feel whole. That need is the first seed of obsession. Freud taught that much of our behavior is driven by unconscious desires. A bruised ego taps directly into those hidden drives. The man starts to replay your reactions, searching for clues and meaning. He cannot let it go because it was not just about you. It was about him and the image he holds of himself. Now, that image has a crack, and he will keep coming back to the source of the crack, hoping to seal it with your attention. Freud described narcissism as the original state of self-love we all experience before learning to love others. In many men, parts of this early narcissism remain intact, especially when it comes to romantic dynamics. They crave admiration, not just from others, but from women who reflect back their grand image of themselves. This is why a woman who challenges that reflection becomes unforgettable. When you don't mirror his sense of superiority, but instead remain unmoved by his charm or success, it disrupts the narcissistic supply he unconsciously seeks. Attraction intensifies not when you praise him, but when you seem like a mystery he can't solve, a mirror that refuses to reflect him. That emptiness drives him to chase, to fill the gap with your validation, which he starts to crave more than anything. Freud would say that narcissism makes people fall in love with those who resemble the idealized versions of themselves. But if you subtly deny him that reflection, he doesn't just want you. He wants to fix you, convert you, prove himself to you. In trying to win over your approval, he becomes entangled not with your reality, but with the fantasy he projected. That fantasy becomes his obsession. According to Freud, we are not entirely aware of what drives our desires. Beneath our conscious thoughts lie repressed needs and unresolved conflicts, especially around love and approval. For many men, the unconscious desire for validation is tied to early childhood experiences, particularly how they were seen or ignored by parental figures. In romantic life, this unresolved hunger reappears. When a woman resists giving immediate validation, she touches on that buried need. The man does not know why he feels so drawn to her, but the reason is deeply psychological. She becomes a symbol of the approval he never fully received, a maternal or paternal echo that triggers unconscious longing. He feels compelled to earn her attention, even if she never directly asks for it. Freud emphasized that repetition is how the unconscious tries to resolve its old wounds. So the more a woman withholds validation, the more the man repeats behaviors. To gain it, he may double his efforts, offer more attention, or become jealous. He is not reacting to her alone, but to the unresolved drama within himself. And that makes his desire more intense, more obsessive, and more vulnerable to manipulation. Freud believed that rejection, especially when not fully understood, awakens deep internal conflict. When a man feels subtly rejected by a woman he desires, it doesn't just bruise his ego. It unsettles his unconscious assumptions about being wanted, admired, and in control. That small denial reactivates feelings of inadequacy he thought he had buried long ago. But this is exactly what makes the obsession grow. A subtle rejection creates a space of uncertainty, and the human mind cannot stand uncertainty. The man starts to question what he did wrong, what he missed, and how he can regain the connection. He fills the silence with fantasies, scenarios, and imaginary conversations. In this internal dialogue, you become the central figure of his thoughts. Freud taught that people are drawn to what they cannot have because it symbolizes something they lost in childhood. When you don't immediately respond to a man's advances, you become that symbol. You represent the forbidden, the unreachable, the thing that would make him whole if only he could possess it. And the more he tries and fails, the deeper he falls into obsession. Freud identified projection as a defense mechanism where people assign their unwanted feelings to others. In relationships, this means a man might project his fears of inadequacy onto you, interpreting your independence as rejection or your silence as manipulation. But in reality, what disturbs him is not you. It is the mirror you hold up to parts of himself he cannot accept. This projection creates an illusion of control. He convinces himself that you are playing games, being difficult, or trying to test him. This belief helps protect his ego from admitting he feels vulnerable. Ironically, the more he believes he is in control of the situation, the less he actually is. His actions become driven by emotional reactivity, not logic or power. Freud explained that when we encounter something in another person that we repress in ourselves, we experience both fascination and fear. Your confidence, distance, or unpredictability might trigger feelings he has tried to suppress. By projecting his discomfort onto you, he turns you into a psychological battlefield, and in doing so, he becomes attached, obsessed, and unknowingly exposed to your influence. Transference, one of Freud's most powerful ideas, is the process of redirecting feelings from one person to another. In romantic dynamics, this means a man might unconsciously project feelings he once had for a caregiver, ex-lover, or idealized figure onto you. If you embody certain traits he unconsciously associates with comfort or rejection, you become more than just a woman. You become a symbol. By subtly mirroring some of those emotional triggers, you can create a lasting imprint in his psyche. For example, offering warmth and then withdrawing it can awaken early memories of inconsistency or longing. He doesn't know why he feels so much so quickly, but you are activating parts of his emotional past that were never fully resolved, and his unconscious wants to replay the story with a different ending. Freud taught that transference is not logical. It bypasses reason and dives straight into emotion. If you position yourself as someone who both soothes and challenges, nurtures and denies, you pull him into a cycle of emotional intensity. He starts reacting to you as if you were someone from his past. That confusion keeps him hooked, searching for clarity that only your presence seems to offer. One of Freud's more controversial yet revealing theories is the concept of castration anxiety. It represents a man's deep fear of losing power, authority, or desirability. While not always sexual, this fear often emerges when a woman challenges his dominance or refuses to submit. In response, the male psyche activates defense mechanisms to protect his fragile sense of control. When you trigger this, fear without aggression but with emotional distance or subtle superiority, he begins to feel unsettled, His usual charm may fail, his confidence may crack, and instead of walking away, he clings tighter, trying to prove to himself that he still has power over you. This reaction is not strength, it is fear disguised as desire, and that fear becomes obsession. Freud identified common defense mechanisms like denial, displacement, and rationalization that help the ego cope with such discomfort. But these defenses only deepen the bond. The more he explains to himself why you are not worth the effort, the more he returns to your image in his mind. He cannot escape what threatens him, because deep down he believes conquering you would restore his lost sense of power. Freud acknowledged the enigma of female sexuality, describing it as a deep mystery that both attracts and unsettles men. When a woman chooses not to fully reveal her intentions, her emotions, or her level of interest, she taps into this mystery. And for the male unconscious, mystery is irresistible because it activates the instinct to pursue, to conquer, and to decode what cannot be easily understood. Withholding attention is not about playing games. It is about controlling the rhythm of emotional exchange. When a man is not sure where he stands, when he cannot predict your responses, he becomes consumed by the need to figure you out. Each unanswered message, each moment of silence becomes a question he must resolve, and that question loops endlessly in his mind. Freud would say that mystery stirs the unconscious because it represents the unknown parts of ourselves. A woman who maintains her autonomy, who does not immediately feed a man's ego, becomes a symbolic mirror of his inner void. He sees her, but he also sees the parts of himself that crave something deeper. That craving, that tension, is what drives obsession forward. Freud believed that what we repress never truly disappears. It hides, waits, and returns in disguised forms, often in our desires and fixations. When a man becomes obsessed with a woman who bruised his ego or denied him validation, it is not just about her. It is about the return of old emotional wounds that were never healed. She becomes the surface, but the pain runs deeper. You might remind him without knowing of the first time he felt rejected, unworthy, or invisible. Freud called this the compulsion to repeat. The man is drawn to you not because of who you are alone, but because you awaken something he once tried to forget. The more he feels out of control, the more his unconscious pushes him to repeat the cycle, hoping this time he will win. This is why obsession grows in silence. The less you give, the more space his mind fills with stories, projections, and fantasies. You become not just a person, but a symbol of redemption, of victory over his past. And that is the cruel genius of the unconscious. It binds us to those who hurt us just enough to keep the wound open, but not enough to make us walk away. Freud often placed women in the position of being observed, analyzed, and desired. But when a woman understands the workings of the male psyche, she no longer plays the passive role. She becomes the one who sees through the illusions, who recognizes the unconscious patterns behind male behavior. In doing so, she reverses the gaze and takes back the power of influence. By refusing to play the expected role, by withholding approval, attention, or emotional dependency, you disrupt the script he unconsciously follows. You are no longer the object of his desire. You become the author of his desire. Every time you act from self-possession instead of emotional need, you shift the dynamic. He feels it, and he cannot look away. Freud may not have imagined women using psychoanalytic insight to influence relationships, but his theories make it possible. Understanding transference, projection, and unconscious desire allows you to navigate male ego with precision. And once you master this, you are not manipulating. You are reclaiming. You are becoming the subject of your own story, not the supporting role in his. If the male ego is a construction built on fragile illusions, what happens when a woman stops feeding it and starts questioning it? The answer is obsession. When you understand the unconscious patterns driving his desire, you stop reacting and start directing. Are you ready to stop being chosen and start choosing? If this opened your eyes, subscribe now and take the power back into your hands.